Starmer's migrant deal, national triumph or humiliation. Before we dive into what might be the most contentious policy debate of the year, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to stay informed on this one because what's unfolding at Dover isn't just politics as usual. It's a full-blown battle for Britain's borders, and the numbers are rather damning. Right? Let's get straight to it. 16 migrants deported to France this week. Sounds impressive when you read the Home Office press release, doesn't it? The government's patting itself on the back. Shabana is making bold declarations about securing our borders, and Labour's spinning this as some sort of historic breakthrough in Anglo-French cooperation. 42 people returned under this shiny new deal with Emmanuel Macron. Historic, they say. Groundbreaking, they claim. But here's the thing that should make every British taxpayer's blood run cold. Whilst those 42 were being sent back, over 15,000 have arrived on our shores this year alone. 15,000. Let that sink in for a moment. The Conservative opposition isn't mincing words. Chris Philps come out swinging with a phrase that's going to sting in Westminster for weeks to come: national humiliation. And frankly, when you look at the mathematics of this arrangement, it's rather difficult to argue with his assessment. For every single person we've managed to return to France, an average of 372 have made the journey in the opposite direction. 372. That's not a deterrent. That's not border security. That's barely a rounding error in the grand scheme of Britain's migration crisis. It's rather like trying to empty the English Channel with a teaspoon while someone's filling it with a fire hose. Now, the one-in one-out deal that Keir Starmer struck with Macron earlier this year was supposed to be the silver bullet, the diplomatic masterstroke that would finally create a genuine disincentive for the dangerous channel crossing. The theory sounds reasonable enough, doesn't it? For every person France takes back, they agree to accept one through legal channels. It's meant to discourage the smuggling gangs, reduce the dangerous crossings, restore some semblance of order to our immigration system. But theory and practice are dancing to very different tunes at the moment, and the British public is beginning to notice the discord. Here's what's particularly galling about the current situation. We're now just 82 crossings short of matching the entire total for 2024, and we've still got months to go. 36,734 people have crossed the channel in small boats this year. 369 arrived just this past Saturday alone, crammed into 7 boats that somehow made it across one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. 7 boats. 1 day. And we're celebrating sending back 16 people as if it's some sort of victory. The optics are absolutely dreadful, and the substance is even worse. Shabana stood up and declared that for many years illegal migrants entered our country with no consequence, and she's positioning these returns as the beginning of a new era of enforcement. If you come here by small boat, you can be sent back, she warned. Terribly stern. Very serious. But the numbers tell a rather different story, don't they? 23 arrivals under the treaty versus 42 returns. That bit actually looks decent on paper. But when you zoom out and see the total picture, when you recognize that thousands upon thousands are still making the crossing with apparent impunity, the whole narrative rather collapses like a poorly constructed deck of cards. The Conservatives, naturally, are having an absolute field day with this. They are claiming they have the solution all worked out. Leave the ECHR, remove all illegal immigrants within a week of arrival, and what they are calling the merry-go-round of appeals. Rather dramatic, but it does have a certain ring to it. Chris Philps gone further, making the genuinely alarming claim that rapists, gang members, and foreign offenders are slipping through whilst the government sits on its hands. That's not just political rhetoric. That's a direct accusation that the system isn't merely failing, it's actively endangering the British public. And is thrown in a jab at Reform UK for good measure, dismissing them as a one-man band with no detailed plans. Westminster's getting rather spicy, isn't it? But here's a fascinating bit that's getting lost in all the political theatre and partisan squabbling. Martin Hewitt, the border security chief, told MPs this week that the number of small boat arrivals is frustrating, but insisted the work to stop the smuggling route was always going to take time. Always going to take time. That's the sort of thing you say when you're asking for patience, when you're managing expectations, when you're essentially admitting that nothing's going to change dramatically anytime soon. It's the governmental equivalent of check back with us in a few years and maybe things will be different. Hardly the stuff of confident leadership, is it? The deeper question that nobody in power seems willing to address properly is this: What exactly is the strategy here? Because from where the British public is standing, it rather looks like we're negotiating from a position of spectacular weakness. France has no particular incentive to take large numbers of people back. They are quite happy to wave them off from Calais, knowing full well that once they're in British waters, they become Britain's problem, not France's. The Channel has become a one-way conveyor belt, and Macron got precisely zero political motivation to switch off the machinery. The one-in-one-out deal might have sounded brilliant in the negotiations, might have made for excellent headlines when it was first announced, but it's proving to be about as effective as a chocolate teapot when it comes to actually controlling Britain's borders. The smuggling gangs aren't trembling in their boots. The crossings haven't slowed. And the British taxpayer is footing an increasingly enormous bill for a system that appears to be creaking under the weight of its own contradictions. What's particularly maddening for voters across the political spectrum is the sense that this was entirely predictable. Anyone with half a brain could have looked at this deal and calculated that unless France was going to accept thousands of returns, not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands, it was never going to make a meaningful dent in the crisis. The mathematics simply don't work. You cannot claim to be securing Britain's borders whilst presiding over record numbers of illegal crossings. You cannot herald a return of 42 people as historic whilst 36,000 have arrived by the same route in the same year. The cognitive dissonance is rather extraordinary, and this is where it gets properly interesting from a political perspective. Labour's entire pitch on immigration was that they'd be the grown-ups in the room, that they'd abandon the conservative rhetoric and actually solve the problem through competent governance and improved international cooperation. Starmer positioned himself as a serious alternative, the former director of public prosecutions who understood law and order, who could negotiate with our European partners and deliver results rather than headlines. But 9 months into government, the results are looking rather anemic whilst the headlines are getting progressively worse. The Conservatives can smell blood in the water. They are hammering away at this national humiliation line because they know it resonates. British voters might disagree on the specifics of immigration policy, might have vastly different views on asylum and integration and multiculturalism, but very few people think that the current situation, record crossings, minimal returns, billions spent on accommodation and processing, represents competent governance. It's the sort of issue that cuts across traditional party lines and gets people genuinely angry. Reform UK, for their part, are watching all of this with barely concealed glee. They don't need detailed policy proposals when the government's own numbers are doing their campaigning for them. Every boat that lands on a British beach, every hotel that gets converted to asylum accommodation, every statistic showing increased crossings, it's all ammunition for their argument that the mainstream parties have fundamentally lost control of Britain's borders. Nigel Farage must wake up every morning, check the latest crossing figures, and think Christmas has come early. But perhaps the most troubling aspect of this entire debacle isn't the political point scoring or the partisan warfare. It's a growing sense that nobody in Westminster actually has a credible plan to fix this. The Conservatives talk tough about leaving the ECHR and rapid deportations, but they had 14 years in government and the boats kept coming. Labour promised a different approach, more cooperation, smarter diplomacy, but the boats are still coming in record numbers. Reform UK offers simplistic solutions that likely wouldn't survive contact with legal and diplomatic reality. And meanwhile, the British public watches the numbers climb higher and higher, wondering why on earth their government seems incapable of controlling who enters a country. The international dimension adds yet another layer of complexity. France isn't some client state that can be ordered around. They are a major European power with their own domestic political pressures and migration challenges. Macron's got no interest in making life easy for post-Brexit Britain, particularly not when taking a harder line on returns might provoke backlash from his own left wing. The power dynamics in this negotiation heavily favor Paris, and Starmer's discovering what conservative ministers learned before him. You can't simply negotiate your way out of geography. Britain's proximity to France, the existence of the Channel as a relatively short crossing, the presence of established smuggling networks. These are structural realities that don't vanish because you've signed another agreement with Macron. The Home Office keeps promising that more flights are coming, that returns will scale up, that this is just the beginning of a tougher enforcement regime. But we've heard these promises before, haven't we? How many times have we been told that the corner's being turned, that the tide's shifting, that the latest initiative will finally crack down on illegal crossings? The public's developing a rather healthy skepticism about governmental assurances on immigration because the evidence of their own eyes tells a different story. When 36,000 people can cross the channel in small boats in a single year whilst the government celebrates returning 42, something's gone rather badly wrong with the messaging, if not the entire policy framework. So where does this leave Britain? Stuck in a rather uncomfortable position. Frankly, the legal frameworks around asylum and human rights make rapid deportations extraordinarily difficult. The diplomatic realities mean France isn't going to suddenly become enthusiastic about accepting thousands of returns. The domestic politics are toxic, with Labour getting hammered from both the right on border security and potentially from the left if enforcement measures get too aggressive. And all the while, the boats keep coming, the costs keep mounting, and the British public's faith in their government's ability to manage immigration continues its steady decline. This isn't just about the numbers, though the numbers are damning enough. It's about competence, control, and whether British democracy can actually deliver on what voters are asking for. When a government promises to secure borders and the crossings hit record levels, when they herald diplomatic deals that produce 42 returns against 36,000 arrivals, when opposition parties can credibly describe the situation as a national humiliation, that's not just a policy failure, it's a crisis of governmental legitimacy. And that should worry everyone, regardless of where they stand on immigration policy, because if the state can't perform this most basic function of controlling its borders, what exactly can it do? The coming months are going to be absolutely crucial. Either Labour finds a way to dramatically scale up returns and reduce crossings, proving that their approach can actually work, or this issue is going to continue festering, poisoning their broader political agenda and handing ammunition to their opponents. The Conservative will keep hammering away at the national humiliation angle. Reform will keep pointing at the numbers and offering their simplistic solutions. And the British public will keep watching boats arrive on their beaches whilst wondering why their government seems so utterly powerless to stop it. That's where we are. 42 returns. 36,000 arrivals. One government insisting it's making progress. One opposition calling it humiliation. And one country wondering why this seems so bloody difficult to get right. The numbers don't lie. The politics are brutal, and Britain's border crisis isn't getting solved by press releases and diplomatic photo opportunities with Emmanuel Macron. Look, if you want to stay ahead of the political curve and understand what's really happening beyond the spin and the sound bites, you know what to do. Subscribe to UK Connors, because this story's far from over, and you'll want to be here when the next chapter unfolds. Trust me on that.